Good afternoon. The National Assembly of Wales is now in session. And the first item this afternoon are questions to the First Minister. And question 1 is Kirsty Williams.
Happy New Year, Presiding Officer, and Happy New Year to the First Minister. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policy on school federation in Brecon and Radnorshire?
Thank you. We're committed to school-to-school working, including federation as part of a self-improving school system which underpins our policy in Qualified for Life, but it is for schools and local authorities to determine whether federation is the best option for schools locally and will lead to improved outcomes.
First Minister, your government's stated policy is that federation indeed can be a very viable alternative to school closures, especially in rural areas where school closure may mean young children travelling considerable distances to schools, and also recognising schools as an important social aspect of a wider successful and thriving community. What steps do you take to ensure that your policy intention in your documents is actually carried out by local authorities and they actually do give due consideration to federation as an option rather than simply looking at closure as they're currently doing with the case of Nantmel and other small primary schools in Brecon and Radnor?
Well, we would encourage any local authority that's speaking about a specific instance to consider federation, and schools have had the power to federate by choice since 2010. And to encourage greater federation, in 2014 we introduced regulations which allow local authorities to federate schools as well as schools themselves. It's certainly an option that local authorities should be looking at wherever they face decisions over schools, and of course we would expect them to give full consideration to the regulations we put in place in 2014.
Question 2, William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the impact of extreme winter pressures on the NHS in South Wales East?
Yes, the NHS always plans for this as the busiest time of year. Health boards and trusts have managed effectively through the holiday period into January. It is clear that there has been resilience despite some material increases in demand into January that have provided some peaks in pressure that have been managed locally.
I'm grateful to the First Minister for his answer. We have had, as you recognise, unseasonal weather, particularly mild, so very little incidence of frost or snow resulting in breakages and fractures, which would normally be to A&E. We haven't had a major flu outbreak, and yet we still have extreme pressures on the health service in South East Wales. Does this mean that the correct resources are not being allocated?
No, we've seen an increase, for example, on some days in A&E of 25% compared to the same period last year, and some days of significant pressure with higher ambulance calls and arrivals at emergency units. Nevertheless, the system has coped. What happens with A&E? I think I'm right in saying that A&E attendances are actually higher often in the summer, but they tend to be cuts and grazes, sometimes fractures. They don't involve a long stay at A&E. In the winter, especially when there's damp weather, respiratory conditions are the issue. They, of course, especially amongst older people, require a longer stay for assessment in A&E and often admission to hospital. And that's why, of course, we see pressures building up in the winter, especially at this time of year. But despite those pressures, we know that the ambulance service and indeed the LHBs have managed, and we're confident that the plans that they've put in place have been effective.
Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch yn fawr, blwyddyn newydd dda pawb.
Thank you and Happy New Year to you all.
Outlined how it planned to tackle increased winter pressures in our hospitals. Could you outline how well government efforts to liaise with social services and primary care providers is working so far to reduce unnecessary hospital admissions this winter, please?
Well, if we look at delayed transfers of care, they are reducing in Wales. We're glad to see that they're coming down. The member will have seen the money we put into the Intermediate Care Fund, which will help, of course, in terms of people being able to remain at home and to come home. It's not simply a question, of course, as the member will know, of dealing with pressures as they arise in the hospitals, but also, of course, being able to make sure that people can go home as quickly as possible. We're seeing a downward trend in Wales in terms of delayed transfers of care.
We now move to questions of the party leaders, and first this afternoon we have the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd a blwyddyn newydd dda.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and a Happy New Year to you all.
First Minister, last night you participated in the first major public debate on the future for Wales within the European Union. You went head-to-head with the voice of the far right. Do you think your performance helped or hindered the Welsh campaign to remain in the EU?
Well, I leave that to others. What I can say is that this is a hugely important issue. It is the major constitutional issue that we will face this year, and I will never stop making the case for Wales's membership of the EU, to protect the 200,000 jobs that rely on our membership of the European Union, to recognise the billions of pounds of funding that we've had, and of course the access to one of the world's biggest single markets. And I will keep on making that case for the next few months.
Well, First Minister, I guess it's up to people to decide whether or not you helped or hindered that case. It's my view that those who try to frighten people into voting a certain way run the risk of a backlash. People want to hear a positive case for Wales remaining in the European Union rather than a new version of Project Fear. Yeah. Now, you said last night that EU reform was not on the agenda. Have you given up building a better Europe, just as you've given up building a better Wales?
I mean, it's the Prime Minister who has set his face in favour of reform. It's for him to deliver the reforms that he has suggested. I think there are some areas where the European Union needs to reform itself. It needs to be more transparent. The Commission needs to be less powerful and the Parliament more powerful. It could do with not moving around between Brussels and Strasbourg, as it does. But she and I will both agree there's a lot wrong with the structure of the UK as well that needs reform. It's a question not of walking away from the European Union, but securing reform, but that keeps Wales at the heart of Europe.
First Minister, people want a positive vision. They are yearning for political change at all levels, and they are fed up with politicians telling them that this is as good as it gets. Now, a new Europe is possible, I believe, just as a new Wales is possible. But you failed to put that positive vision in that debate last night. We got an insight last night, I think, as to how you intend to approach the period leading up to the referendum, and I hope that you will reflect on last night's debate and give serious consideration to changing tack. Now, moving on from last night, can you outline to us what contingency planning your government has or is undertaking for Wales's removal from the European Union? Have you sought legal advice on the ramifications of Wales voting in but being taken out? And what action will the Welsh Government take in terms of its relationship with the European Union if we are no longer a part of it? In other words, First Minister, do you have a plan B?
The Leader of Plaid Cymru and I have had discussions, sensible discussions, where we have talked about how it might be possible to put in place a cross-party campaign in order to put the case for Wales's membership of the European Union. Now, she fails to outline how she would have done anything different, what message she would put forward, and it seems to me she's already given up. Because what she's talking about is, what will we do if we leave? I haven't given up yet. I will continue to make the case for Wales's membership of the European Union. I will continue to make the case for Wales's prosperity, for the need for Wales to be at the heart of Europe, and certainly it's not our intention to give up at this stage, which seems to be the message that she puts across.
We now move to the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Arty-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Happy New Year to you. I think it's still politically correct in the second week of January to wish people Happy New Year, but Happy New Year to everyone in the Chamber as well. We all saw the terrible pictures in North Wales around the flooding. There can be nothing more depressing, I would suggest, than walking into someone's home and seeing their lifetime's possessions thrown outside because of the flooding and the effects, and some of those possessions completely irreplaceable. Some of the issues, I'm sure the Natural Resources Minister will touch on in his statement. You have toured many of the villages and towns that were affected by the flooding. Now some time has passed, not for the victims of the flooding, because they'll be living with it for many weeks and months ahead, but many of the public bodies, such as local authorities, have had time to make an assessment. Have you had any requests from the local authorities for additional support over and above what the government has made available from the consequential that the Westminster government has given out on the flooding to date? And will you be furnishing that level of support and making it available in the quickest time possible?
At this stage, no, but we have put in place about £3.3 million into a fund that local authorities can bid into. It's early days yet, in fairness, as far as that fund is concerned. Nevertheless, it's money that will be made available to them in order to help with smaller schemes to deal with flooding. When I visited the north and visited Llanrwst, the flood defence is there by and large held. Speaking to local representatives, they were very happy with what had been done. So I last visited Llanrwst some years ago with the member then, at the time, where there had been a difficulty not just with the river overflowing its banks, the Conway, but groundwater was coming up through people's houses. That didn't happen this time around. On the A55 at Talabont, money was never an issue in terms of funding the scheme, but the scheme is in the design stage, and Gwynedd County Council have been working with Natural Resources Wales and ourselves in order to put such a scheme in place. There was never a question of other funding not being made available, and people there I visited, and I was happy to see that scheme can now move forward. In Bontnewydd, again, a village where there is a flood defence in place, and in fact the flood defences weren't overtopped. Again, it was a problem with groundwater. And what NRW are telling me there is there's a need to look at the entire system, the entire catchment area, to stop the flow of water coming into the river there at Bontnewydd via the streams. But the message for us is this, that we enter an age where it's becoming ever more difficult to predict where flooding might occur. We know that there are some areas of Wales historically that have suffered flooding. The Conwy Valley is one such example. But NRW will need to examine very carefully, as will local authorities, as the flood authorities, as to where new pressures may arise, and then, of course, deal with them.
Thank you, First Minister, for that answer, and I appreciate many of these questions might well be addressed also by the Natural Resources Minister in his statement. But also, there are some solutions that can be brought forward via the Rural Development Fund, allowing farmers to use land as floodplains to hold water back. And I do declare an interest as a farmer and the Rural Development Plan. But also, in other parts of the United Kingdom, the rules and regulations around ditch clearance and allowing landowners to clear those ditches without hindrance to allow water capture on their land will be removed as of April the 1st. Will the Welsh Government be taking forward some of these proposals? For many communities, it's the big, shiny projects that people look at, which cost many millions of pounds, and I get that, but equally there are some very small steps that we can take, and I would suggest the Rural Development Plan and using some of the monies in that to help landowners play a more active part in flood prevention, and also adopting some of the measures taken by other parts of the United Kingdom to allow for ditch clearance for water containment could be welcome additions to the arsenal to help communities stem this flooding problem.
Yes, it does depend, of course, on us being members of the European Union to access that money. It has been used, if I remember, for Reed Felin, in terms of the flood scheme there. But he's right to say that, and I use the Conwy Valley as an example, you cannot simply guard against flooding by building a wall. The issue in the Conwy Valley is that there were flood defences around the farmland. So the farmland was protected, but the settlements were not. In order to control flooding in the Conwy Valley, there are occasions, and I think it happened this time around, where the farmland must be allowed to flood. Farmers, of course, are part of that. There were discussions with them in advance of that project being put in place, but you can't channel a body of water and try and build walls around it all the time. The water will come up as groundwater. It has to be allowed to flood into its natural floodplain from time to time. In order to enable houses to be protected. And the Conwy Valley is a good example where farmers and the local community worked together in order to put in place an effective flood scheme.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. The other issue that happened over the Christmas recess and as recently as yesterday morning was the road network with the adverse weather that was predicted via weather forecasting. In North Wales, for example, around the icy conditions, there were 68 accidents yesterday in North Wales. The M4 in your own area between Pencode and Sarn was shut at least half a dozen times, and around the Newport area an equal number to that as well because of the adverse weather. There is an issue in my mind over the way the Trunk Road Agency in Wales do manage these key routes. And I would be interested to know whether you will commission a study to see exactly how they are managing the maintenance of these roads to look into these adverse weather conditions that are causing, both for flooding and icy conditions, road closures. We can argue about the European Union, we can argue about the Middle East, we can argue about global politics, but for most people, when they get outside their front door, they want one of three things: either to get to work, get the kids to school, or get to that appointment that is critical to their end day. Those in North Wales yesterday couldn't do that, and many people in South Wales over the festive period couldn't do it either. And for simple maintenance in many issues, these areas could be resolved. So will you undertake to have a review of the way the Trunk Road Agency is engaging in this process so that we can be satisfied that all corners are covered off?
Well, it's not to do with maintenance. First of all, most of the accidents, I understand, were on local roads, local authority roads, although there were some instances on trunk roads. What I am informed by local authorities is that the weather was not predicted by the Met Office yesterday. As a result, of course, the roads hadn't been gritted. But in terms of what we saw between Christmas and New Year, I saw the M4 flooded out between Pyle and Pencoed, something I've never seen, ever, in all the years I've been living there, such was the volume of the rain. We saw the same thing happen, of course, on the A55, and it goes to show that we do face challenges now of flooding in areas that were previously thought not to be at risk of flooding. And that now is a challenge for NRW in order to carry out an assessment of where the pressures will come in the future.
And now we move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you. First Minister, when the Literacy and Numeracy Framework was launched in 2012, you said it would transform standards of literacy and numeracy in Wales. Last year, your Schools Inspector Estyn said that the programme had had no impact in improving literacy levels. 1 year on, would you expect progress to have been made?
Well, first of all, it didn't say that because the findings of the interim report presents a positive picture of the early stages of implementation of the programme. Bear in mind, of course, the fieldwork was carried out between September 2013 and December 2014. That's the period in which the programmes such as the LNF and testing were first introduced to schools. So this is an evaluation that's taken place in the very first period of the testing programme. It shows overall a positive picture, and we will continue with the national literacy and numeracy programmes.
What the evaluation does say, and I quote, that they have found no robust evidence to suggest that the literacy and numeracy framework has supported an improvement in pupils' outcomes. Now, it's 4 years since the programme was launched. 4 years, half the time a child will spend in primary school. That's their one chance, First Minister, and it's your responsibility. So what is your expectation? When will your programme see real outcomes and real delivery for our school students?
Well, the Leader of the Liberal Democrats is mistaken because the evaluation took place between September 2013 and December 2014, as I've said. That was the period in which programmes such as the LNF and testing were first introduced to schools. It doesn't go back further than that. Whilst good progress has been made, we want to see further progress, that much is true. Speaking as a parent, I am delighted that I am able to see the progress that my children are making in school, and many, many other parents take the same view. She asked when we will see improvement. We are seeing, of course, the best GCSE results ever in Wales, not as a result of this, that much is true, this is too early yet, but it does show that what we are putting in place is improving education, and the frameworks themselves will show improvement over the course of the next few years.
Well, I'm delighted, First Minister, that your children are making progress, but I'm interested in everybody's child. Every child in this country deserves to go to a decent school, a school that's not just been put into special measures like one of the flagship schools in your own county borough has been. Every child in Wales should go to an outstanding school. Now, the State of the Nation report last year said that the scale of progress required by Wales to ensure that its children, all our children, can compete academically with others is dramatic. We need dramatic progress from your government for our children. Now, you have had 16 years. That is the second longest running government in modern history. So if it can't be in the first 16 years, when are we going to see the dramatic progress that our country needs? And why should any parent or any pupil in Wales believe and have hope that your government can deliver it for them?
The Leader of the Liberal Democrats willfully misrepresented what I just said. Like all parents in Wales, herself included, I am delighted that I am able to see how my children are progressing, as I'm sure she is as well, and all parents are in Wales. And she, just be careful what she said, because that's not what I said in terms of the way that she represented it. If you look at Wales, we have the best GCSE results ever. We see schools being built. No schools were built when her party was in power in Westminster. No schools were built when her party were in power in Westminster. We see new comprehensive schools being built across Wales. We see new primary schools being built across Wales. And we are seeing delivery in education when her party were in power in Westminster. The major pledge that they put forward to the people of Britain is that they would not increase tuition fees. That was broken immediately. That was broken immediately. So when it comes to keeping promises, we're not going to be lectured by the Liberal Democrats.
To go to
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good afternoon, First Minister. Will you make a statement on the recent floods in West Wales?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, the Minister for Natural Resources will be making a statement later this afternoon on the flooding across the whole of Wales. Now, over the lifetime of this government, we will invest over £33 million in flood and coastal risk management in West Wales to help build resilience to flooding.
First Minister, when are you and your government going to get to grips with planning policy? Because you have a policy that enables county councils to allow house builders to develop in areas of flood risk, as evidenced by the recent builds in my constituency that have been flooded in the last 3 months, let alone the last few years. However, that same planning policy is being used to stop a £100 million investment into South Carmarthenshire on the grounds that the company is building in an area of risk. Yet when you look at the topography, if that business were to flood, then we would have chunks of Swansea and a significant portion of Llanelli underwater as well. So it's a ridiculous and conflicting situation. It's a situation that's been raised here before, this disparity in planning policy and the allowing of one thing but not another thing, houses versus jobs versus lives versus risk. When, First Minister, will you and your government finally get to grips with this and go one way or the other and make it coherent and consistent?
More rain fell in Capel Curig than anywhere else in the UK over the course of the last week of December. And yet we did not see flooding on the Conwy. We did see flooding in Cumbria. Why? Because of the failure of her party to invest in flood defences in England. Those are not my words. Those are the words of others, the House of Commons Committee. There was not enough investment put in. And so we cannot accept any kind of lecturing from the party opposite because of their failure to invest in flood defences in England. When it comes to TAN 15, I mean, I know it's uncomfortable for them, but there we are, that's the truth. When it comes to TAN 15, I remember as the minister responsible for introducing it, the Conservative benches opposed it because they thought it was too extreme. How many times did I hear Conservative members saying, we can't have this policy where you're not allowed to build in an area where there's a 1 in 1,000-year flood risk? It's too extreme. TAN 15 is perfectly clear, but it's absolutely crucial that local authorities follow TAN 15, and where that doesn't happen, of course, there are remedies if they turn down planning permission in circumstances where they do not follow that planning guidance. But the planning guidance is absolutely crystal clear.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, First Minister, no party of government has taken climate change seriously enough, and that is very unfortunate indeed. But in turning to the impact of these floods in West Wales, a number of businesses and individual homes, rather than wider areas, but many individual homes have been affected in places such as Tenby, Saundersfoot and so on. And we have seen in England that local authorities have been providing grants of £500 to assist those people to get back up on their feet. And in Scotland, they have provided a grant of £1,500. And I was pleased to see that the Community Institute of Wales has launched a fund to restore things after the flooding today. Is it your intention as government to support such grants here in Wales, to assist people and to assist businesses to get back on their feet, or to contribute to that national fund that I mentioned?
Well, of course, this is something that we are considering, and some people have insurance and some people have been paid partial payments towards any immediate demands for their homes or their businesses. This is something that we're considering, and I'm sure that the Minister will be able to answer these questions in detail during his statement.
William Powell.
Diolch, Llywydd. Blwyddyn newydd ar bawb.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Happy New Year to you all.
The Rainscape Sustainable Drainage Project in Llanelli has proved to be worth its weight in the recent flooding events, particularly at Queen Mary's Walk in Llanelli. And Dŵr Cymru, as I understand it, has got further plans to roll out similar schemes in other flood risk zones across Wales between now and 2020. But what plans does the Welsh Government have to undertake a full evaluation of how that scheme has actually worked in practice, so we can build in as many learning points as possible to make other locations resilient against flooding in the future.
The member, I mean, it's something that's always under consideration. The member is absolutely right to point out that controlling flooding is not just about building walls. It's about stemming the flow of water by planting trees quite often in the upland areas. I've seen examples of that in Montgomeryshire where that has happened. And that, of course, with the trees absorb the water and help to stem the speed of the water coming down the hillsides. The issue of soakaways and the issue, of course, of not building driveways particularly that are impermeable to water. And part of the challenge that we face is that many of our road surfaces were built at a time when those standards were far lower. Water, it does not soak through the road, it comes off the road quite often, as I saw in Talabont, down at Camber and into some people's houses. Many of the roads, the A55 was one of them, were built to a far lower standard than we will build now. And of course what we try to do is to look at sections of the A55 in order to improve those sections and avoid the risk of flooding. But the member's quite right to point out that there are a number of ways to deal with flooding rather than simply building walls all the time.
Question 4, Keith Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on procedures for local authority asset transfers?
Well, it's a matter for the individual local authority, namely the transfer of assets, and of course I would expect them to consult in detail with the local communities.
Thank you. There have been concerns among Carmarthenshire residents on proposals by the council to transfer parks to community councils or charities or private organisations, including Park Howard in Llanelli, which engendered a petition signed by over 5,000 people to keep the park in public ownership, and that will be presented to the council tomorrow. Do you agree that local authorities should hold consultations with the public on any proposal to transfer asset and to conduct due diligence of any private organisation that wishes to take part in any such asset transfer?
Well, the public assets are local authority assets, and so councils should consult with the communities and also with the residents of those communities when they're considering the transfer of assets. And of course they should also undertake a full analysis of the risks when they transfer public assets into any third party. Guidelines are available on this from Welsh Government, namely the guidelines on community asset transfer, and that was published by us last year.
Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, following your recent government's assessment and consultation on protecting assets of community value, what consideration have you given to the 78% of respondents who actually support the power to initiate asset transfer from public sector bodies? We are so far behind in Wales compared to how the UK government are handling this. And in the same consultation, 68% actually reckon that we should have greater opportunities for a first refusal basis. How are you taking forward the community assets transfer? And, you know, why are you not bringing forward solid proposals like the community right to bid here in Wales and allow them to actually make the decisions about how they retain their local assets?
Well, the reason, of course, why this is being carried on in England at a great rate is because of the massive cuts in funding the local authorities have received in England. Cuts that I'm sure her party would like to replicate. We know they want to cut local government funding by 12% here in Wales. That seems unambitious compared to their colleagues elsewhere in England. Our view is that where councils can no longer continue to support assets, we would encourage them to seek community solutions. Making the disposal of assets a key decision, as the Minister in fairness proposes, as part of the draft local government bill, will facilitate asset transfer and make the whole process more transparent. But fortunately, local authorities are not under the same pressure in Wales as they are in England, where the cuts are so large.
Roger Lynn Thomas.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Keith Davis described a situation that existed in Carmarthenshire 12 months ago, when the council was led by the Labour Party at that time and threatened clubs and society at a local level, if they didn't take responsibility for these assets, that they would face an increase of 1,000% in the rents that the councils was charging them. And Plaid Cymru, as opposition, managed to overturn that decision. They continue to do that in leading the council. Will you congratulate Emlyn Dole in Carmarthenshire for holding discussion with local clubs and societies on the future of these assets in a situation of huge cuts on local authority funding and in a situation where they are facing very difficult decisions indeed?
Well, we can all see in this chamber that Carmarthenshire Council has changed its leadership, and I see now that the member is alluding to the council in a very different way to the way he talked about the council when the Labour Party were in charge. And I'm sure there'll be more fun and games about that over the ensuing months. I would say to any county council, of course, to consult in great detail with the local people to ensure that their voices are heard.
Question 5, Lindsay Whittle.
First Minister, what special measures is the Welsh Government taking in order to eradicate child poverty by the year 2020?
Yes, our child poverty strategy, published last year, does set out our priorities for tackling child poverty, and the specific actions in that strategy include the rollout of the Healthy Child Wales programme, doubling the numbers accessing Flying Start, closing education attainment gaps and reducing the number of children living in workless households.
Well, First Minister, we know that the UK Tory government's policies on tax credits and welfare reforms are not helping poorer children and families in Wales, to say the least. But can you really explain why, after 16 years in office, this Welsh government has still left Wales with the highest level of child poverty in the United Kingdom?
Well, we're not helped. He's quite right by the policies of the UK government. Bear in mind, his party were in government for 4 years, something which they tried to sweep under the carpet, and they were part of the previous government, which I think we should emphasise. But we have a child poverty strategy. It reaffirms our ambition to eradicate child poverty by 2020, and we will continue to move towards achieving that ambition.
Mike Hedges.
Presiding Officer. In Swans East, Flying Start ensured that children start in nursery with developmental age equal to their chronological age. Community First gives support to children in education via evening homework clubs and evening holiday support. Does the First Minister agree it is important to continue these two schemes and also to ensure the maximum take-up of these opportunities for the benefit of our children?
The member is absolutely right to highlight the schemes this government has introduced in order to help many families and many children. And that is a commitment that we will never waver from. It's a commitment we will always make to our poorest families. It's a commitment that is at the very heart of what we stand for as a party.
Mark Ishwood.
Thank you. Although the proportion of children living in poverty in low-income households in England is its lowest since the 1980s, as we heard, Wales has the highest child poverty amongst UK nations, the second highest amongst 12 UK regions, but persists in using a measure of child poverty which appears to show child poverty reducing when economies are shrinking and families are getting poorer. What consideration have you therefore given to looking at measures being applied in England to look at the matters that lead to the underlying causes of poverty, such as educational attainment, drug and alcohol abuse, and family breakdown, and of course worklessness?
Well, of course, if I remember rightly, the definition of poverty in England was changed in order to make it look better than it actually was. But he asks me to deal with what is the fundamental cause of poverty in the UK, and it is a Conservative government. There's no question about that, with all the policies that you have introduced. One of the problems, of course, with people living in poverty is the fact that they are on low pay, and what his party proposes to do is to cut their pay even further. Even further. We used to say in this country, if you get a job, then your financial circumstances will improve. What the Conservatives will do from April onwards is to say to people, even if you get a job, you will actually not be any better off. And that is something that no government since 1945 has ever said to its people, and it's shameful that the Tories have done it in Britain.
Christine Chapman.
Thank you. The UK government's changes to the social security system will have serious repercussions on child poverty levels here. The data contained in the Bevan Foundation's recent report highlighted the numbers of children in Wales in households in receipt of some type of benefit shows. We know that 284,000 children in Wales are in households receiving tax credit, and 86% of these children in a household where someone works. First Minister, how is the Welsh Government taking this into account in your strategies to tackle child poverty?
Can I thank the member for highlighting the heartlessness of the policies being pursued by the Conservative government? The Leader of the Opposition laughs at that, he always does. The heartlessness of the policies being pursued, the vendetta that's being pursued against those who are on low pay, and the help that's being given to those who have the most amount of money. We shouldn't be surprised at that. That is, after all, what his party stands for. We're well aware of the disproportionate effect of the UK government's welfare reforms in Wales. We know that the impacts of those reforms are not spread equally. We know that those households that are already around the poverty line, families with children, and disabled households will be amongst the hardest hit. We will take account of that as part of our child poverty strategy. I cannot say, of course, we'll be able to deal with all the damage that the Conservative government is doing, but we know that they continue in their vendetta against the lowest paid, the disabled and children.
Question 6, Gwenda Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the role of business improvement districts in Wales?
There's been excellent progress across Wales, with 5 areas last year voting to establish business improvement districts. There's a positive movement with business, well, this is a positive movement with business communities, of course. They work with a range of partners in these areas and provide a significant programme of investment to support regeneration and economic development.
Thank you for that, First Minister. Neath Inspired is the name of the new Business Improvement District in Neath Town Centre, formed with Welsh Government funding, as you say, after a successful balloting of local businesses. Neath Town Centre businesses have seen the advantage of commerce set priorities for local investment, regeneration benefits and local partnerships. Going live on the 1st of April, Neath Inspired will run for 5 years and result in £500,000 additional funding. First Minister, can you outline what measures the Welsh Government is undertaking to promote the formation of more business improvement districts?
Yes, thank you. We're pleased to see the new districts being established. We are expecting 4 further ballots in 2016. We want to see the conclusion of the whole programme before we're in a position to reflect and consider how we take this forward in the future. But what is encouraging is that there is plenty of interest in towns around Wales in putting in bids in the future.
Susie Davis.
First Minister, my region, of course, is already fortunate to have a very formidable business improvement district in Swansea, and its success is due in no small part to businesses' ability to work maturely in partnership with the local authority on its own priorities, often, of course, the same priorities as the council, but not always, rather than being dominated by the council. With the new bids in Neath and, of course, the establishment of a bid steering group in Bridgend, would you agree that bids need to be led by local businesses, and that any suggestion that the council's own decisions on town improvements might be contingent upon a bid behaving in a particular way would be inappropriate?
Now, these are bids from businesses. Clearly, those bids have to chime with the priorities of the local authority. But of course, I'd expect businesses and local authorities to work together, as we've seen in other towns in Wales, in order to provide benefits for towns. And in fairness, the members already highlighted the Labour Council in Swansea and the work that they have done in working with businesses in order to provide improvements in that city.
Rhys Iorwerth.
Diolch, Llywydd. Wrth gwrs,
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, there is huge potential for business improvement districts to give an economic boost to those trading areas, and it's entirely right to say that the consultation with businesses within those industry does set the foundations for those areas. But would the First Minister agree with me that it's crucial also to consult with wider stakeholders within those areas, including residents within the community?
Well, not just the local businesses are interested in this, of course. Other organisations are interested in order to create the right trading environment or ethos in the area. It's extremely important that bodies and work in partnership in order to ensure that the towns themselves are improved for everybody's benefit.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, business improvement districts obviously have potential for great economic benefits, but for many smaller communities or individual high streets within larger cities that are not the city centre themselves, perhaps a full business improvement district is a step too far, and there may be benefits to facilitating networking within those local communities that is perhaps short of a business improvement district. And I'm wondering what support the Welsh Government can give to those local communities, for example, like the arcades in Cardiff or high streets such as the Canton High Street area, to develop those networks and informal trading relationships.
Well, I mean, bids, of course, are important for some town centres. We have viable and vibrant places, which is, of course, the programme that also helps in terms of developing areas that are of particular importance, centres of particular importance. If we look at Cardiff, Canton High Street, which seems to be doing very well at the moment. There are other parts of Cardiff where Wellfield Road is another example of this, where there are districts that have been traditionally doing very, very well. But it's important, of course, that when we look at a city the size of Cardiff, and indeed there are many other settlements that would be in the same category, we don't just look at the centre, but we understand that there are other retail areas in the city outside of the city centre that are also important to those areas. Albany Road, Wellfield Road being an example of that area, and of course down towards Canton.
Question 7, Darren Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What action is the Welsh Government taking to prevent the recurrence of floods in Llanddulas?
Well, we know that Llanddulas experienced coastal flooding during the storms of 2013. We have put £544,000 in towards the construction of coastal flood defences. They have substantially lowered the flood risk in the village. That said, I do know that 3 houses were affected by flooding over the course of the last few weeks. Awful, of course, for those people who are involved, and of course heartbreaking. We have made, as the member has heard, £3.3 million of support available for local authorities. I'd now, of course, expect Conwy Council to investigate the sources of flooding and bring forward an appropriate solution with the relevant risk management authorities.
Thank you for the detailed response, First Minister. Like you, I was very disappointed to note that flooding had reoccurred in Llanddulas. It faces not only flooding risks from the sea, but also from the River Ddylas, which flows very closely to the properties which you have mentioned. But those households have faced flooding now 5 times since 2010, and even though investment has been put into the coastal defences, part of that flooding has been as a result of coastal problems, although it was the fluvial flooding that affected them over the Christmas period. What discussions is the Welsh Government having with Conwy Council to encourage them to bring forward a bid, particularly for Llanddulas, and in conjunction with Welsh Water and Natural Resources Wales, so that they can get this problem sorted once and for all for those families, albeit small in number, who have been affected?
Yeah, it is right to say that the flooding was caused by surface water from the adjacent highway. The local authority were unable to deploy a pump, we understand, because that pump was already deployed at Trefrw, where in their assessment there were more properties at risk. But I'd repeat what I said earlier on. It's for Conwy Council to bring forward proposals for consideration, and I would of course encourage them to do so in order to help those people who are affected in Llanddulas.
Claire Griffith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There is a more general question arising as to where flood prevention work has taken place in the light of the increasing challenge of climate change, where sea levels are rising. What process is in place to assess whether the works that have been completed over the past few years are still appropriate as we move on to face the greater challenges of flooding in the future?
Well, that's not what happened over Christmas, not in Bontnewydd or in Talabont, nor in the Conwy Valley. It wasn't a matter of the water overtopping the walls. We've seen the problem previously in the Conwy Valley when the water came into the River Cravenant, and of course in Aberystwyth we had the River Lerry, and we had the same problem in St Asaph. But that wasn't the case this time. Having said that, of course, Natural Resources Wales always assess how effective the embankments safeguarding communities are, bearing in mind the climate change that we are witnessing.
What?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you refer to the fact that we need to look at the A55. You state, perhaps, that the quality of the road build initially is now acceptable given all the rain that we have seen over the past few months. But also the 483, the Wrexham bypass, the A5 also either have been closed temporarily or there have been temporary speed restrictions, which actually creates problems for travellers too. So will the Trunk Roads Agency look at all of the roads in the areas affected to ensure that programmes looking at government expenditure in the future are targeted at the right areas?
The agency is responsible for the trunk roads, the main roads that is, and not, or the major roads, and not the local roads, which are the responsibility of the local authorities. As regards the A5, A55 and the M4, what happens again is that although it's a government responsibility, it's the local authorities that maintain the roads on behalf of the government, and that's true of the A55 too. But of course we would expect any agency to consider all the risks in every stretch of road that they're responsible for in order to ensure that those risks are assessed and in order to mitigate those risks ultimately.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2.